welcome to the Sharp Way Show. Yes, it is Larry Sharp here, a little bit after 7 p.m. on the East Coast. And do I have a great show for you tonight? I know I say that every night because I'm right every night. It is a great show every night. So now I have another great show. Tonight I have with me and with you, someone who is going to talk about global issues that you probably haven't thought of, and global issues with actual answers, not like just we should be nice. That's not what he's going to say. He's going to actually give you some actual answers to questions that you might not have thought of. I hope you will enjoy it. Who am I kidding? I know you're going to enjoy it. I'm very lucky to have with me an activist and a former independent candidate for Senate in the great state of New Jersey, the man himself, Daniel Burke. How are you, sir?
I'm great, Larry. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. And if you want to follow Daniel, you can follow him on Twitter at Burke for Senate. And if you're listening to this, it is Burke, B-U-R-K-E, the number 4 Senate. Check him out on Twitter and you can follow him there. Now, you decided, Daniel, I don't know why, but you thought, I'm going to go up against Cory Booker. That is not an easy task at all. I mean, it's almost as bad. Diane Sayer decided she was going to go up against the powerhouse of Chuck Schumer. You guys like going up against the big boys. So why?
Okay. I mean, we're in a situation where the U.S. Senate is packed full of lunatics who are mostly committed to financing neo-Nazis and trying to cause a conflict with the other major nuclear power in the world. So you really got to go after them and not try to be incremental, I think. You know?
No, that absolutely makes sense. I get that. I mean, look, I went after, Cuomo. And so I kind of get you on that one. I do completely. I do. But there's a common thread through a lot of things you talk about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of those is the idea of feeding the world's population so that we don't go to war, like making the entire world better, whether that is through jobs or food. And that is like the key to not going to war. Walk down that road for me.
Okay, so I've been a member of the LaRouche movement for about 10 years. And I ran as a LaRouche independent. My title was, or my party name was LaRouche Was Right. And it's because I basically...
LaRouche was right. I like that. It's good.
So everyone got that in their mail. And I did that because, the reason that I continue to devote myself to this organization that we have and the movement that we're building is the idea of peace through development.
Okay.
Which is what you're referring to. It's the idea that peace is not the negation of war. It is something active. It is something that it's a shared future. It's a shared mission for humanity.
And so peace is actually like a journey. It's not like we're at peace. We're always moving. Okay. Oh, I like it. I think it's great. Keep going.
Yeah. Please. I mean, because there has been a huge roadblock put in front of the possibility of peaceful collaboration among nations. And that is the presumption that first we have to have, before we start talking about our actual collaboration, before we start talking about the future that we want 50 years from now, we need to somehow solve the intractable problems of politics today. And that allows us to be manipulated because there are third-party actions that come in behind the scenes, assassinations, for example, as we've been talking a lot about the Kennedy assassination and the need to actually address that now. We're almost 60 years to his assassination.
I think now is the time, Daniel. Now is the time. 60
right?
years.
And Mike Pompeo was afraid.
That's the right time.
Right. Even today, they're afraid to release the documents. But therefore, we've got to lay out, like, what do you want? What do you want the world to look like? How do we make sense of the fact that you have a continent, Africa, that has an incredibly young population, young, right? That continent is a representation in the world of the hope for the future. And we have to figure out, as a species, so to speak, how we can change the organization of our world so that we can actually see a future where people can grow up and be human and contribute to the rest of humanity.
But
You know,
what I hear what you're saying is you're saying because we're trying to have every country agree to everything that we're never going to find that space where we start working for the entire planet. Is that kind of where you're going? Am I reading you right?
well, yeah, I mean, look at the just look at the artificial problem between the so-called rules-based order and
Hmm.
Russia, China, for example, or the BRICS, or
Okay.
Belt and Road Initiative, right? This is very
Sure.
explicit attack between the proposal that these are two things that cannot possibly work together, and it's true because this rules-based order is, it's based on creating problems,
Mm,
then saying because you, falsely claiming that the other party created the problem, and then
sure.
saying
Of course.
because of this problem, therefore, like for example, the big case that's really crucial in the recent period is the admission by Angela Merkel and by Francois Hollande of France that the Minsk Accords, the Minsk agreements,
I
uh,
did hear about this. Yep.
right, they were never actually intended to be followed through on. I mean, for people who aren't familiar with this, there was an effort that was made called the Normandy Group, where
Yep.
France and Germany came in to support I think the OECD and Ukraine and Russia in determining how to solve the Donbass conflict in 2014,
Right.
right? And and they said they were going to work together to try to stop it. And then, just recently, we have learned that Merkel admitted, and Hollande did too, they never really planned to have peace at all. They said the whole
Right.
point was to buy Ukraine time to build up its military in preparation for this war. And
Yep.
not only,
So let me walk down that road even more
sure.
because I feel like you are concerned that the reason why you have to attack and go big, as you say, and not go incremental is because you're worried there's going to be a new dark age. That this is there's just almost like a trigger, right? Once the trigger is for either an economic collapse or a war or nuclear war, even or anything, and that the reason why the average American sitting down watching this or listening to this is going to be like, come on, the people at top, they don't believe this. Just this guy, Daniel, no way. But your thought process is you think that there are people in America, the leadership, who believe we can actually survive and win a limited nuclear war. And to be forward, Daniel, you're not the first person to tell me that. It's not like this. I've heard this before, and
Yeah.
you think this is true. Tell me why.
Well, I mean, you have to kind of remind people of where we are in terms of nuclear policy or the danger of nuclear war. First of all, it has been gravely covered up what the consequences would be of nuclear war. I mean, in the sense that people are not discussing it, even though there is an acknowledgement that this is likely. I mean, it was about a year ago that Admiral Richard, I believe, of the PACCOM, Pacific Command, he came out and said, we must say now that it's not simply that a nuclear war with Russia and China is possible, but rather, or we have to say now that it is possible. Excuse me. That's what he said. So they're
Okay.
admitting that this is a real possibility. But then why aren't people talking about the fact that that would mean nuclear winter and you wouldn't be able to grow crops for 15 years in the whole world if a chain reaction of nuclear weapons go off? And we had, with the Schiller Institute, which is LaRouche organization, our international think tank, we had a conference with an expert on this named Stephen Starr who talked about the actual consequences. So for one, the fact that it's not being discussed at all, even though they're admitting
Hold on. Let me be fair, Daniel. It is being discussed. New York City put out a PSA
That's right.
and told us that if it's nuclear a war, we go inside and take a shower and then we're good.
Right. Yeah.
That's
you know
it.
what?
We're good.
I grew up in Honolulu when I was in my early childhood, and I have family there. And they got the text messages. I don't know, what was this, 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, where it said, there are bombs on the way, and so shelter. And for several hours, they believed that they were actually going to be incinerated.
Yep.
And it was around that time or earlier that Tulsi Gabbard actually in the Congress confronted, I believe, Ash Carter at the time, who was the defense secretary, and said, what would happen if there were a nuclear war with Russia and China? Isn't it the case that you would see hundreds of millions of people die? What have you guys gamed out? What do you think is going to happen, and so forth? And actually cause them to have that, that Dr. Strangelove moment where they come out and say, well, only 30 million people would die.
Yeah, that's it.
It's not, just, but so that's the first thing I want to point out, is that the fact that it's not really being discussed should open that up for you. But look at what's going on. I mean, on the question of dark age, the immediate things that are happening.
I did throw a lot at you. I apologize.
No, it's good. It's good.
Sorry.
But the things that happen today and tomorrow are connected to both the dark age and the nuclear war question. One of them is, of course, the World Economic Forum is meeting in Davos.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Everyone's paying attention to that, right?
I always call it Davros because I'm a Doctor Who fan, and Davros was the evil genius in Doctor Who that wanted to destroy everything. So I like calling it that.
I mean, yes. It's sick, right? It's just sick to imagine these mega billionaires all getting together and saying we have the right to dictate things for the world. But their policy is this Great Reset policy, which is the enforcement of the green policy, which means the elimination of reliable energy, the elimination of cheap energy, the elimination of technologies that are required for that, and the elimination of fossil fuels, which are urgently needed for humanity in every form to be able to survive and develop. I mean, it's just absolutely necessary for humanity to have fossil fuels. And they're attacking all of that, while at the same time they're claiming that basically we have the right to dictate to Russia, to China, to every country on the planet that they're going to follow along with our economic policy of austerity, global shutdown.
We're going to be eating bugs, right? And that's the thing they said, we're going to eat bugs.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, which of course, see, that's a funny thing, right? My friend Dewey likes to point this out to me. A lot of people get excited about the eating bugs thing, but the whole thing we're talking about here with the dark age is that you're not going to be eating anything. You know what I mean?
We don't even get bugs, Daniel? We can't even get bugs? Wow.
You see a bug, you're going to be saying, oh, thank Jesus, I got a bug.
Oh my God, we don't even get bugs. This is not good.
No, but I mean, because we're talking about shutting down the possibility of having any future that is better for the next generation. And the consequence of that is that the whole fiction of money printing, of bank bailouts, of worthless
everywhere,
right? The gambling is that kind of fiction can come unraveled.
So let me go back to the one piece though. Do you really believe? I guess this is a question, right? Lots of people do bad things, but not always with bad intent, right? It's not always. Sometimes they do bad things with good intent. It all depends upon where their heads are, what they're doing. Do you think the way the U.S. government's moving is because they honestly believe, hey, we can survive a nuclear war, it'll be fine. 100 million Chinese will die and we'll be fine. Do they honestly believe that? Or do they just say that because they're okay with whatever the outcome is? What do you think?
So I think it's a great question, and people should put themselves into the heads of the people who are actually in control of our nuclear weapons and try to imagine how they think things through and so forth. But it's funny. I mean, Dr. Strangelove is pretty accurate, and you should imagine the conversations that are happening inside of the war room. Even though it was a comedy, it's like not that much of a satire, right?
Right.
And it is clear that there is a gear up towards war with China. I have in front of me a little excerpt from an article that came out from a leading expert at the U.S. Army War College. His name is Robert Evan Ellis. And he has recently published a statement claiming that we are on the verge of war with China, like a full like sort of white paper.
Yeah, I think I just saw him on some event. I think I just saw him speak before. Yeah.
And
some online event.
He is proposing that we cannot, that we have to force Latin American countries basically to go along with us. We have to prevent the possibility that China will use infrastructure in Latin America that they have contributed to as part of a war strategy. And therefore we have to prevent any countries from working with China to build
Well,
infrastructure
that's
with the
great
Belt and
because
Road.
our interventions have always worked well.
Yeah, right.
So what could go wrong?
And he's saying that a war is basically inevitable with China.
Got it.
So therefore we need to be prepared. So the fact is that people, they are taking us down a road where I think they don't necessarily consider the consequences because of an incredible hubris. You really have to read like Greek tragedy.
So you think that's what it is? It's hubris. It's just we're America and we've always gotten through stuff and we've won every world war. So why wouldn't we win this one? It's literally that we have the plans, we've got the money, we're America, USA number one.
Think about like Caligula or Nero.
Sure.
And consider that sort of outlook where they believe their own lies, they've created their own fiction, and then that's, I think, everyone in society is kind of reacting against the fact that
So Joe Biden does believe he's the God King. Is that what you're telling me? He does believe he's the God King?
Ever since he fell on that bicycle, probably.
That's what it is. That's what messed us up. Let me grab a couple of comments if I could.
Please.
But I want to say something else, guys. If you like what you're hearing, if it's interesting for you, do me a favor, click that like button right now. If you don't like it, I get it. I don't know why you're watching. But if you like it, then do me a favor, click the like button. Everyone's watching, click that button. It does matter. But I'll ask one more thing of you. Are you watching this on Twitter right now? If you are, then retweet it. Retweet this right now if you are watching on Twitter. Either way, wherever you're watching, this goes on like 9 different things. Just hit that like button. Either way, there's a like button on everything that's out there. There's a like button. But if you're on Twitter, please retweet this. And also, if you're on Twitter, please follow Daniel, if you would, on Burke for Senate. And that's Burke, if you're listening, Burke, the number 4, Senate. That would be great. So if you can, please do that, guys. I would appreciate it. Let me grab a couple comments if I could. Let's see here. Shelly says, Cory Booker used to be a good mayor. It's like something goes terribly wrong when people gain popularity. I thought the same thing. So I remember Cory Booker as like going in and saving people from burning buildings and stuff. I remember that. He was like Superman. And then all of a sudden he got popular. He got a hot girlfriend. And he was like, maybe I am a god. See that, Daniel? You're right. They all think they're gods.
Maybe I should be president.
There we go.
Right?
Maybe I should be president. But Joe gives you a little bit of pushback. He says, I disagree. Peace is the natural state of things. He says, war or violence is the action that must be taken to exist. Interesting concept. What do you think about that, Daniel?
Well, it could be taken a couple of ways, so I'm not entirely sure how he intends it. But
okay, I'll pop it back up, please.
Sure. I mean, I think that what is underlying the universe is harmony. That is my philosophical outlook, and that is how I orient myself. I think that within the human species, I wouldn't approach things the way that I do if I didn't think that there was enough goodness in the human species that we could rise to a higher level and we can overcome the problems that are so catastrophic at this point. So I believe in that. And it is true that war, violence, these are sort of aberrations in my strong view. It's like, it's not human. It is literally inhuman to act in that way. It is completely erroneous. But the observation that I'm making is that if you want peace with your neighbor, build a bridge, build some nuclear power plants that will benefit both of you. Figure out some way to have a mutually reciprocal relationship that's based on the common welfare of the other. I think that's what makes the whole difference.
Well, but I think he could be right too, because what you're saying is peace is, you've got to work for peace. It's got to be a thing you're doing. You're saying it's not going to be peaceful unless I build the bridge. It's not going to be peaceful unless I build the nuclear power plant. That if I begin to do the things that's going to help everybody, that violence, and I think it's true that violence tends to be the last resort, right? I mean, there are obviously some people who don't feel that, but the vast majority of humans, I don't want to use violence if I can use some other way of getting what I want, right? I would rather trade for it, ask for it, work for it, something. I would rather do any of those things than use violence. And I think the vast majority of humanity would agree with that. So I guess kind of both could be true.
I hear you. I think that go back to this question of why these people could come to this godlike perception of themselves, and why would they
Mhm.
believe that they could, get away with nuclear war, for example.
Yep.
I think it has to do with a deep cynicism about the nature of man. And when you get down to it,
Ooh. Yes.
you have, right, you have people who think, well, the human species is really a disgusting animal that doesn't deserve to live, and so I might as well be the king of the hill. I'll be the
Right. I'll be
baddest.
the king of the disgusting people.
Exactly, right?
Yes.
And therefore they're like, well, any lie is justified because there's no such thing as truth, and there's no such thing as, as something like human dignity, and people can be treated however they should be treated. And that's how you have people who basically say, we should shut down the world's economy, and
Yep.
the poor people of the world, screw them,
And that's literally what happened. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Dave goes on and says, and governments wonder why some people think the CIA assassinated JFK. Yes, I mean, I get it. I mean, there are people who think the FBI killed MLK,
Absolutely.
right? And in my perfect world, Daniel, I wish that was all crazy conspiracy and people were nuts and how could you imagine such a thing from our government? But I don't think that. I wish I did. Like in my perfect world, we would trust our government and we would vote for people and they would be great and they would never do something like that. But wow, they have done so much that they basically made this not be odd at all.
Yeah, I agree.
So the Scientific Libertarian says Russia is the #1 exporter of natural gas. Now they're talking about banning gas stoves. Yes, and in New York, they're already out. They're banning gas everything. Ban everything. Absolutely. Oh yeah, are you chopping it a bit? Do you want to say something, Daniel? Please go ahead.
Well, I just want to say that, I mean, now you're getting on something that's important, which is that there is a capability in physical economics that is coming from the BRICS countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. The recent inauguration of Lula in Brazil is quite significant because he's indicating an intention to work together with that grouping very strongly. And if you look at the amount of steel produced in the world, and you just take Russia, India, China, that's like 66% of the world's steel. Most of it China.
Is that right?
Yeah, we published a report in February of 2021 that went through a lot of this. Or if you look at 2022, actually, if you look at the amount of coal produced, huge amount of it. China actually produces 50% of the world's coal, and they consume it too. And then keep going down the list of all these physical things that you really need, natural gas and so forth. Yes, the United States produces a lot, but
it does. We do produce a lot. It's true. We do.
But steel, we don't produce that. Concrete, forget it. I mean, the countries that are doing that are ones that are preparing to build up the world for the next 50 years, and they're working towards that. And that's where we should be working with them and not, allowing our insane government to try to destroy them.
Absolutely. Some of the people are showing their age by the duck and cover under a picnic blanket. Yes, I remember duck and cover. I remember when I was in junior high school and high school. Go get under your desk. That'll save you. We did that. We did. I remember, right? The picnic blanket. And then Michelle says, where I am, I should be pretty safe. Ooh. Michelle lives out in Western New York, out in the Allegheny County. I know Michelle, so she loves that. And for now, Michelle, like the initial blast, you're probably good. But the fallout part is the bad. You're going to be, I'm in New York City. I'm gone, right? You guys are going to envy me. Michelle's going to be like, oh, I wish I was Larry Sharp and vaporized because I got to live around. I got to be searching for the bugs Daniel was talking about that we don't even get. So Michelle's going to be searching for bugs. I'll be vaporized. So, yeah. You're Michelle, safe for now, Michelle, but we'll be together later. It's fine. We'll be together later. We're still going to say hi a little bit later. That's okay. So Brian says, Russia has clearly stated that there will be no limited nuclear war and they will not strike first. But if a nuclear weapon is launched at them, they will retaliate against London, D.C., etc. Is this true? I actually don't know this. Daniel, do you have more information on this? Do you know what Russia's actual plans are?
There's actually a very relevant thing that's happened recently, which is that it appears that Putin has made a public statement that suggests that they are willing to reconsider their policy on nuclear weapons. In other words, that they are saying, we are willing to consider a policy that would include us being prepared to fire nuclear weapons at you before you fire them at us.
Wow.
And that's a change. So that's my understanding. There's much more to, I don't have it in front of me. I don't have it clearly memorized, but I would encourage people to take a look at that. Whereas on the other hand, the Foreign Ministry of China just came out yesterday responding to this new US-Japan collaboration to try to massively increase the Japanese budget. I've spent a lot of time in Japan. It's really insane. The defense budget, in other words, they're preparing for the idea of Japan being like part of the a key strategic, military effort against China, which is just insane.
So it'll be PATO, not NATO.
Yeah, right. And
there we go. They'll be part of PATO. That's fine.
But what they said from China is that China is firmly committed to a defensive nuclear strategy. We have honored our pledge to no first use of nuclear weapons at any time and under any circumstances, and unconditionally not to use or threaten to use nuclear weapons against non-nuclear weapon states or nuclear weapon-free zones. And it's the only one of the 5 nuclear weapon states that have made these pledges. Whereas Biden, yeah, it's pretty striking. Whereas Biden recently made clear that he's willing to consider first use.
Wow. Well, people are liking the bug thing. Joe says, I just want to be clear, I'm not excited about eating bugs. And then Dave says, eat bugs for breakfast while the rich eat fake dehydrated steak.
Remember Dick Cheney was talking about continuation of government, the bunker.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes, absolutely. 100%.
So they're thinking about it.
Let me go to the other part, which I brought up, which that was nuclear war. But there might be what I would actually consider maybe a worse war for someone like me, because nuclear war, I'm done fast, right? I'm done, right? I don't even know. I'm done. But there's a worse kind of war, though, and that's economic, right? That one we all slowly suffer from, right? An economic catastrophe. You have called our current system a global financial oligarchy. And I think very few people would argue with you on that. I think most people would agree with you on that. Yeah. And with that in mind, I mean, happening right now at Davos, right? Perfect example, right? They're showing up there to do stuff, right? But you also talk about kind of like a Wall Street London bubble. And I think most people don't get that. Like they know that there's this oligarchy. Like they get that. But the average person out there doesn't understand what you mean by the Wall Street London bubble. Can you kind of walk down that road?
Yeah, I want to hit oligarchy first because it is a word that's used commonly. But I want to indicate that LaRouche, as he developed this concept, he always counterposed it to republic. In other words, that in an oligarchy, you have people who say, we're going to consolidate the power for just a handful of people because human beings are basically trash and we're going to do whatever we want with them. And then in a republic, you have the idea that we're acting on the basis of the common welfare of the population. And implicitly, LaRouche argued, that means you're acting on behalf of humanity because you're doing what's good for human beings and you're not doing things that are based on, on privation and usury and rape and looting. So what's going on? I mean, how big is the debt bubble? There are serious, the debt bubble, at least as according to the Bank for International Settlements, which is like the central bank of central banks commonly called, is at least around $800-900 trillion. Okay.
Wow.
Some people would say, what is that? Stocks? No, the stocks is very minor relative to swaps, derivatives.
Well, hold on. You said 900 trillion.
Yes.
Well, Pete Clark just put up our national debt.
Oh my goodness.
Which is 31 trillion, 384 billion, 494,575,703.76.
Right.
And by the way, since he posted it, it's now higher.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, so this dwarfs that, right? I mean, the global GDP is something like 80, maybe somewhere around there, $1 trillion. So, and there are reasons to believe that it's actually much bigger than what they claim. It could be up to $2 quadrillion. A large
2 quadrillion.
Yes.
That sounds like you made that number up.
I know it does, right?
That's literally what it sounds like.
Practically meaningless. But,
yes. Like you just made that number up.
Yeah, right. But I mean, so Yeah, 1,000 trillions is 1 quadrillion, and it could. So we're close to one, at least on paper, as far as they even say publicly, and it could be twice that. And
Wow.
the large majority of that are basically gambling debts. Uh, where is,
Gambling debts. Help me out with
yeah.
that. What do you mean? I mean, they're not going to the casino. So what are you talking
Well,
about?
basically they are. It's just that they use the economy as a casino. It's the
Okay. All right.
derivatives, right? It's the claim. Basically, they're making contracts that are gambling contracts that are based on an idea of whether an asset will go up or down in price, or whether for example, an interest rate will go up or down. And then they
Ah,
say
okay.
this contract, which is an agreement between two people, and say I'll pay you if this happens, and you pay me if that happens. That contract is then valued, and they claim that that is worth something, even though it
Oh,
has nothing to do with the real economy. It doesn't have to do with tractors, doesn't have to do with farms, doesn't have to do with factories, with production at all. And so that has been the basis for building up this bubble, and it's how we got to this situation where, what's the new report from Oxfam, like uh, 49% of the wealth that's been created in the past couple
oh,
of,
right.
what is it? I have it. I had it somewhere, but I lost
Went
track of
went
it.
to like 26 people or
Yeah,
something
that's
like
right.
that.
Huge,
Yeah.
huge percentage of
Yeah.
the wealth that's created in the past couple of years has gone to a tiny handful of people, because
Right.
that's the organization of it, and it's not based on increasing productivity or increasing science and discovery and so
And
forth that
that's
are
the
necessary.
financial oligarchy you're talking about.
Yeah, because their outlook is zero growth. Their outgrowth is their outlook is Malthusian. They're saying, well, we're not going to allow scientific progress. We're not going to allow anyone who thinks creatively. If you think creatively, you'll either be shot or you'll be put in jail, or if you take our money, then you can work for us, right? And
Yes, gotcha. Okay.
the thing is that sovereign nations don't want to go along with that. And so what you
Okay.
have right now, there are a handful of countries that are sovereign. It's like not that many, that actually have control over their own affairs. Russia, China, these are two of the key ones. India to a significant extent. And they're saying, well, we are going to have to figure out how to live in a world without the dollar, right? Which is a
Got it.
controlling factor in the whole bubble,
Right. Right. Right.
because
Right.
they
Right.
notice if you have the wrong opinions, or if you take the wrong actions according to the rules-based order, then they're just going to steal your money.
Right.
They
Right.
just took $300 billion from the Russian central bank. They
I
took, of
just
course,
had a guy on my show last week. He was talking about that's one of the reasons why China is creating a digital currency,
yeah,
that they're trying to get themselves off of the dollar, and it's one of the reasons why they made a digital currency. And he thinks that a lot of nations are going to try to do that as a way to not have one country have all the power over them financially, so they can't use financial weapons of war. That's what he believes. So you're thinking the same way he is.
take a look at what Biden did to Afghanistan. People talk
Mm,
about the exit, and that needs to be discussed. But the more crucial thing from my standpoint, you got 38 million people in that country.
yep.
They had $9 billion, only paltry 9 billion, which is really not much, in dollars reserves that were in U.S. controlled banks. I think at the New York Fed, not far from where you are. And the U.S. government, after the Taliban took over, they just kept the money. They
Yeah, I
froze
remember.
it, right?
Yep. Yep.
The point isn't even money. People don't even necessarily understand it. It's the central bank's funds. So the
Right.
ability of the central bank to circulate credit, to circulate, money into the economy was taken away from them.
Right.
And that money belonged to the Afghan people. It doesn't matter whether it was which government it is. It's the
Right.
Afghans, right?
And now the average person is the one who actually suffers more than anybody else.
And the consequence is that 22 million of those people are in extreme foods insecurity.
There we go. So
So
guys, if you're enjoying the show, what we're doing, then do me a favor and support my sponsor. You know who my sponsor is, right? My sponsor is the advocates.org. When you have a moment, head over to the advocates.org, take the world's smallest political quiz, or there's actually a couple of surveys on things like economics. Yeah, monetary policy. We just talked about it. Take one of those surveys. When you're done taking that survey, share it. Please share it out there. Let people see what you pop up as. It allows people to have conversations, which is what we're doing here now, having good conversations about real stuff. Go to theadvocates.org, support the channel, support them. take one of the surveys and share it on social media. It really does matter. Please do it if you can. If you want to support me directly, you can if you want to. No worries. You can just go to Larry Sharpe YouTube and super chat me if you want to. Super chat me, and and even if you have something crazy or nutty, I'll still put it up. I'll do it. I will do, like, if you care, like I want to eat bugs or something, I will literally put that up, and Daniel and I will talk about you eating bugs. Absolutely, will do it 100%. If you want to do that, please go ahead. But no matter what, please support my guest who showed up here and give me some good time. Go ahead over to Twitter and follow Burke for Senate on Twitter. And again, if you're listening, BURKE, the number 4 Senate. Please follow him if you like. I would appreciate it if you could. So let me grab a couple more comments. I'm getting a bunch of comments. You're motivating people to speak, which is awesome. Good. I love that. So let me grab a couple more of these. Let's see. God, so many of them. I can't. There's so many of them. Let me pick a couple if I can. They're zipping by so fast. So, all right. Keith says, I admit it. My ego went horribly out of control after Larry introduced me on stage. I've been a complete douche ever since. Yeah, I have a problem, Daniel. I do make people think they're awesome. It's true. I do have a problem. It's true. Yes. Darcy says, green billionaires need to start giving out free solar arrays if they really want to convert to green energy. P.S. None of them will eat bugs. Well, we do have to go down that road, don't we? Right? I mean, if I'm a billionaire, as Darcy, I know she's teasing, but she's got a valid point. If I'm going to sit here and say I'm a billionaire and I'm going to save the world because I'm a green billionaire, I mean, I'm flying around with my jet. I'm doing all the things that say I'm not so green, right? I've got a massive carbon footprint, and I'm eating whatever I want to eat whenever I want to eat it, and I'm throwing out all kind of stuff, and I'm consuming all types of things. She's got a point, doesn't she?
Well, it's interesting. Do you see John Kerry made some comments today that are quite relevant to this. They have been promoting the idea of a just energy transition. Yep, and what is this? Right? This is especially about Africa. It's about telling African countries, you're not allowed to develop your fossil fuels. It's bad for the environment. Right. And, and we really would love for you to be out of poverty, but come on now, it's the environment, right? We got to worry about that.
I know you want to eat and everything, but
Yeah, right. Yeah, sorry about all that starvation, that you're dealing with.
I mean, maybe you'll find some bugs.
So, yes, what Kerry said is that the U.S. does not have the $4 trillion to provide that it claims is necessary for the just energy transition. So, in other words, he's saying there is no real possibility of even paying for this green transition. It doesn't exist, right? I mean, implicitly he's saying that other countries have to come together, we have to work together and do it and so forth, but there is not some sort of future where they're going to be able to bring about the aims that they claim they have.
Right.
Because instead, look at what's happening, energy
Sam
inflation.
Even says it.
And
he says if printing money could solve poverty, world hunger, there'd be no poverty or food scarcity, right? If you could just print it away, you would do it, right? Doesn't work. This is your point. We don't have the cash.
The requirement is that we work backwards. You mentioned the World Health Program. The idea that Helga LaRouche had put forward as the chairwoman of the Schiller Institute is just basically reconsider what is the architecture of the world. If we're just going to say we can no longer live with financial oligarchy run out of London, run out of Wall Street, if we can no longer live with this stuff because it's killing us, then what are we going to have? And the proposal, she made a major proposal. She calls the 10 principles recently. We're going to have a big conference February 11th, I believe. It's going to be online. People can watch at schillerinstitute.com. And the idea is you need have...
Can you do .com one more time?
Forgive me, schillerinstitute.com, SCHILLER institute.com.
Good. Okay.
That's our international think tank. And what we're trying to do is organize people at high levels of government. We have sitting Congress people in Mexico working with us. We have the former president of Guyana has been working with us, other people on that level from countries around the world. And we're trying to promote an idea that the new economic order has to be based on benefiting the people. And
Right.
that means we should look towards what would it take to build advanced medical infrastructure in every country in the world. And that's the kind of outlook that we have. Because if you look,
Wow. That is a massive undertaking, though, right? I mean, that's a heavy lift that I would think that to get past all that's a massive heavy lift. But I get where you're going with it. It's a massive lift. Josh says Klaus Schwab is just as an evil
yes.
James Bond villain.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Literally, if it's as if they based them off of him, like they were like, oh, there's our villain. Let's make a movie about him. It's almost like that. I would agree. Yes, I would agree. So let me grab a couple more of this if I could. Wow, I'm sorry, just so many of them popping by so fast. The Nooner clip says building bridges is good. However, there are still bad actors in the world stage via grand chessboard. For far too long, China has been openly antagonistic by being a parasitic leech, i.e. world domination. I think this is a common thought process, right? That every person, I mean, I would bet if you were in China, they'd be saying the same thing about America, right? And I bet we're saying about Russia, Russia's saying it about us, right? I would think each country is saying, no, but they're the bad guy. But he does have a point. I mean, China is going around and dominating many parts of the world, aren't they? With their Belt and Road, is that right? Belt and Road Initiative.
That's right. Well, excuse me. I can understand why your viewer has this view. It's perfectly reasonable if you just, if you're looking at U.S. media, and I don't mean to be condescending in that sense, because there are many different types: alternative media, mainstream media. That
there's the sharp way, which is the best media,
naturally.
Of course.
There are many different media that are promoting the idea that China is seeking world domination, and I really urge you to look into that and see what are the core things that are claimed about China. For example, this guy that we were talking about before, who wrote this whole thing about how we're going to have war, Robert Evan Ellis. People, take a look at who these creeps are. They're like never done anything good for humanity, and not for the United States at all. He starts his attack on China by talking about Sri Lanka, and the claim that China basically, by leasing a port there, was taking over Sri Lanka. That's not true. Just look into it. Sri Lanka's had a devastating situation, but you know who caused it? The IMF, the World Bank, right?
Yep.
And the major private banks in Europe and in the United States, who basically did predatory loaning towards them. The Chinese debt is minimal, less than 10% of their overall debt, and it was debt for the creation of infrastructure, which is completely different from the crap that you're getting from the IMF, where the debt never goes to infrastructure. It goes to basically emergency measures that are then, they say, well, if you're going to take our loan, then you have to eliminate fuel subsidies for your population. Right. And they get their austerity in that way. So my point is, I encourage you to investigate whether it is true that China is actually as bad as they say. I see that the Belt and Road Initiative has 150 countries working with it. And what they're working on is building high-speed rail. I mean, you realize that Africa has, several different African nations have high-speed rail that the Chinese built with African labor and cooperation. The United States has zero miles of high-speed rail. So you can't tell me that this is the same thing. And the people who claim that are Mike Pompeo, who says he can't discuss the JFK files with Tucker Carlson. You know what I mean? I mean, he's just part of the same network that is trying to motivate people on the basis of doing whatever we can to get the military-industrial complex to continue to dominate.
So Ryan says, in order to work for and maintain peace, in my view, libertarians need to work with the Greens and peace and freedom supporters, along with Mr. Burke, in order to achieve it. All hands on deck mentally. I agree. I think that's exactly the right answer. And if you guys are watching a lot of libertarians now, most of us are still sitting in our bubble, but some of us are coming out, right? Absolutely. I'm out. Spike is out. Some of us are out trying to meet other people and to make these things happen. I would agree. I think we have to kind of do that. I think you're absolutely correct. It has to happen. And Daniel, I'm going to say thank you for you coming onto the show, right? You didn't have to, and you decided to. So I'm glad you're out here, spreading the word. I appreciate it.
If I could make a brief comment, because I totally agree with you and your viewer. And I hope to see you, Larry, at the event February 19 at the Lincoln Memorial, which is the Rage Against the War Machine event, in which the Libertarian Party has been organizing with the People's Party, and many different libertarian organizations have contributed to that process, and all types of people, all types of groups from many different political sides. And I will definitely be there, and I encourage everyone to get there who wants to prevent nuclear war and stop the financing of neo-Nazis in Ukraine.
Well, there we go. James is on your side. He says, personally, I think we need to do what China's doing. Basically, instead of forcing our will in other countries to do business with them. That's one thing that I've noticed. I don't think China was mad at all with us being in Afghanistan for 20 years. I think they're mad we're out. I think they wish we were still in. Like, aren't you mad at the Taliban? Come on, America, go spend 10 more years and more trillions of dollars trying to waste your time and energy on Afghanistan. Meanwhile, we're going to go build some stuff in Africa. You keep fighting Afghanistan. Aren't they bad people? Don't you hate them? I feel like, James's point's a valid one in that China's not fighting wars. I mean, maybe in Taiwan, who knows? But that's talk. That hasn't happened yet if it's going to. But we've been fighting wars in Syria, Ukraine, and now we're fighting a proxy war in Ukraine. We fought a direct war in Afghanistan. I mean, we're spending all our money bombing things instead of building things. I think it's a valid point.
I also,
and Joe goes, James Kenny, bingo. So I think we got someone on. He's on set on the side.
Well, just briefly, think about the fact that we can't offer African nations anything. They're like, okay, what is China going to offer? They're going to build highways. What is the U.S. going to offer? Nothing. That's what's going on.
But isn't there a concern or critique I've heard, a critique I'll say, that one of the reasons why China does it is because China doesn't care how corrupt these African nations are. And that America doesn't want to work with corrupt and evil dictators. So China's going to come in and they don't care if you're corrupt. They just walk in and say, okay, who do I have to bribe to move this, to move this village so we can put a railway through it? Oh, that guy, how much? 5 million. There you go. Let's move it. Is that a valid criticism?
So the way the Chinese would talk about it, just to give their say, is that they're not interested in forcing any political system on any other country.
Okay.
And, I mean, I grew up, I was in college when we got that, actually, I guess I was in high school when all of this talk about we're going to liberate Iraq, they're going to welcome us as liberators, all of that was going on, the Guantanamo Bay leaks and so forth. And, I mean, they're not doing that. So I think that that's sufficiently clear. As for corruption, I watched a fascinating film called Britain's Spiderweb, which is based on a book by a journalist named Nicholas Shaxson, which is about the offshore banking system, which is largely controlled by the British Crown, not only. And it's all about how, and one of the key things he focuses on is how Africa has been looted by France, by Britain, by the United States. So the corruption is created from without because they send in money through loans, but they set it up. So they say to the person, hey, I can get you a choice investment if you send that money back out of the country illegally. And so the corruption is induced to a large degree.
Well, there we go. Okay. Joseph says, Larry Sharpe should move upstate to escape. The crime rate's out of control, and there are displaced illegal aliens, homeless people over the city. And I get the sense Larry likes the great outdoors. I do, and I would like to move upstate. I would, and I'm actually considering it. I'm considering going upstate or actually heading to Tennessee. I'm assuming one of those two. Who knows which one? We'll see.
We can't lose you from New York.
I know. I don't want to leave New York. I do. I don't want to, but yeah, I'm just being honest. It's tough up here. Dan, you're in Jersey, right?
Yeah, I'm 10 minutes from the bridge.
So this is not an easy place to live. It is challenging. I do it because I've been here. I live here. My business is here, but it's not easy, right? It just isn't easy. So I want to go on because Sam brings up something. Sam says, as sad as nuclear war is, I worry far more about space wars. If the satellites go down, we're in for all kinds of disaster and mayhem. And you have talked about this too. And you've talked about the idea of, almost, if I read you right, you tell me if I'm off here, creating like a mission for our youth that will kind of unite people of the world to kind of go in one direction, right? And that is colonizing and industrializing both the moon and Mars. This kind of goes in what Sam's talking about. And this, while I got to tell you, years ago, I was already on board, right? I remember
Really?
this is probably, years ago, actually, Newt Gingrich said it when he was running for president in 2016. He was like, and we should have a moon base. And people laughed at him. I'm like, there's many reasons to not like Newt Gingrich. That's not one of them.
Yeah, I
right?
agree.
That was actually correct. Let's give the guy credit where credit was due. And this is my logic then. I'm sure you'll go through yours. Mine was, if we build a base on Mars, all the things we'll have to learn will help us here, right? So, for example, you have to deal with radiation on Mars, on the moon, because there's no atmosphere. So that will help us with like radiation shielding here on Earth. That may help us with like cancer. Maybe if there's no gravity, we can maybe heal bones faster or something. Like, I'm making all this stuff up. I have no idea. How do you scrub the atmosphere for oxygen or something, right? Whatever is the thing, you'll have to figure that out, and it'll help. That was my goal. But you go even further.
Well, I really agree with what you stated, and I think it's really crucial that people consider that. That's basically the rationale that Kennedy gave, that going to the moon will organize the best of our capabilities, and we'll be able to marshal them to do everything that we need to do for the good, But it's true. LaRouche was really far thinking, and he said, you got to think about those transformations of science and technology and of the whole existence of humanity that are going to come about if we can enter into the space phase. He was actually friends, and Helga Zepp LaRouche's was friends with the late designer of the Saturn V rocket, whose name was Kraft Erika. He was a German-American space scientist. And Kraft Erika talked about this. He said that mankind is still in its juvenile state, and that we haven't really become adults yet because we haven't gone out there and done these great things. And indeed, I think this is the right avenue for competition, not from the standpoint of Cold War competition, which is unfortunate.
Yes, and let me touch that for a second. You're not saying America should rush and do this so we can beat the Russians, right? You're not saying that. You're saying this should be an international group where all the youth of the entire world get together to colonize the moon and Mars. Am I right?
Yes. This is a model that has already existed. How long, how long have we had Russian and U.S. collaboration on the International Space Station? Very long time. It's only recently that has become difficult. There's an amendment called the Wolf Amendment or I'm not exactly sure how to describe it, but there's a rule that the U.S. Congress put in place that NASA cannot collaborate with China right now. And I think that's an idiotic rule. It's a disaster, because as long as we say we'll never be able to collaborate on anything scientific and technological, then their scientific and technological growth is a threat to us. Right? That's the whole point.
But isn't the point for that? Isn't that point they're going to steal it all, and they don't like us anyway, and they're going to take it all and shoot their own rocket off and rob us from? I mean, isn't that the logic?
Yeah, I agree. I'm sure that is. I'm sure that is the logic, but it's not good enough. It's just not good enough. I mean, the things that we could do if we collaborated together would be great. The idea that the U.S. can't collaborate with other countries is ridiculous, because we're constantly in collaboration with the Japanese space program, for example, and the European space program. So collaboration is very normal and easy in space. We did it with the Russians, So that's the framework that we should be considering. Russia and China have a moon base planned for 2035. The Chinese space station is.
Wait a minute. The moon's got an American flag on it. That's our moon. What?
So, I mean, this is happening. This is not going away. Yeah. And by the way, the Chinese proposal is to get commercial thermonuclear fusion sometime around 2028. 2028. I have little kids. They're still going to be little kids in 2028.
Yeah.
And, and what we're dealing with is a huge epochal shift. Meanwhile, people may have learned about the big breakthrough at Lawrence Livermore laboratory on thermonuclear fusion.
Oh, yeah.
Which is
Yep.
very exciting. However, that one is primarily focused on military applications. So you
Surprise.
have people, right, who are in the U.S. who continue to think from the standpoint of we've got to get up in space and prepare for space war, as your viewer was commenting. And I don't think that that's necessary at all. I think it is possible to say, okay, we can't collaborate on this for national security reasons. We can't collaborate on that, but we can collaborate on this, and find something that is sufficiently exciting that it creates the basis for goodwill, that it creates the basis for a common mission.
Yeah, but how can we do that when we are literally almost at war over Taiwan, actually in a proxy war in Ukraine?
Yeah.
How do we? I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong in the goal.
Right.
I'm saying how do you get around that in our current environment? And I don't see the environment getting any better in the next, I don't know, 3-4 years at least, if not 10-20 years. Right? Am I wrong?
Well, the Lavrov recently spoke, of course, the foreign secretary of Russia, and he said, foreign minister, and he said that we may have to wait for the next generation of American political leadership. Everything, to go back to what we started with, the Minsk Accords, the whole thing was designed to destroy Russia. They started to, first of all, it was a fraud from the beginning. Then they started to impose sanctions on Russia for not going along with the Minsk Accord, even though they were intentionally sabotaging it. So if you're in charge of the Russian government, your idea is basically like, okay, they want to kill us. They want to dismember Russia. They want to destroy us. Lindsey Graham goes on TV saying we have to kill Putin if we want to see an end to this war.
I remember that.
Right?
Yep.
So I'm just saying that there has to be some kind of an emergence of a new political capability in the United States. And if we don't fight for that right now, then it's never going to come. That's my strong view.
I get it. Let me, if I could, guys, remind you, if I could, if you want to super chat me, head over to Larry Sharpe YouTube. You can super chat me if you like. Whenever you subscribe on YouTube, whether it's Sharpe Way or Larry Sharpe, please click that button and say you want all notifications so you can see me again. It does matter. I'm a good looking man. You're going to be sad if you don't keep looking at me, right? So do that. It does matter, of course. And if you are watching on Twitter, right now is the time. Retweet this. Let other people see it. Let them know this is happening. It does matter. And lastly, please check out Burke for Senate on Twitter. Follow Daniel. He's been good enough to come here. BURKE, the number 4 Senate on Twitter. It does matter. So I want to move to the next piece if I could. Fusion. I am a big proponent of nuclear energy in general, but a lot of people aren't. And you've used the phrase Green Reaper. And that there are so many people who think the world's going to end and that we've got to get rid of all the people and there's too many people and we got to eat bugs and stop eating meat and all the things. And you call this like this Green Reaper attitude. Please walk down that road for me.
Well, I'll tell you about some of the fun stuff that we've done in New York City. And, maybe sometime we can collaborate on this, Larry. But we started going out to the campuses and we invented this is a few years ago, we invented another organization besides our own that had completely opposite views. So we had one table that was our own organization, and the front of the table said, "The world needs more people." And then the other side, the other imaginary organization had a sign that said, "The world needs fewer people." And then we had a couple of our people pretend to be a part of this made-up organization. And we set up the tables sort of next to each other in front of like Columbia University, as though we were like counter-protesting each other or something like that. And large numbers of people came over. 75% of the kids, this was about 4 or 5 years ago. No, 3-4 years ago. 75% of the kids came over to the fewer people table. And then we would say to them, "Oh, I'm so glad that you agree with this. Now, please fill out my survey. Which member of your family do you think we should get rid of?"
No.
They would start laughing, except for a couple of young ladies who said, "My dad."
No way. Oh my God. Yeah, I don't like that guy.
Happen.
Get rid of him. Yeah. Wow.
And
They're
then
already offing people. I love it.
And then we would say, "Okay, oh, that you're right. That's too far. But what country do you think we should get rid of?" and then they would laugh. And then they realized, most of them, that they had been taken in. In other words, they hadn't considered the consequences of their own ideas, so of their own ideas. And so we said, oh, well, you should go to those people because they want to make the
Yeah.
world better,
Right. Yeah. Don't hang out with us. We want to kill your dad. Right. So go over to the other one. Yes.
And we had one guy who
Absolutely.
came out with a green Grim Reaper hood, and he would say to
Ah.
people, "We have to reduce the population within 2 years, or we're all dead." And, I mean,
That's good.
when I look at the kind of Greta Thunberg phenomenon, what's going on is that there's a cynicism that's being induced in the
Yes.
population,
I think
especially
that's
among
true.
young people. And we have to change that. We have to lift people up. We have to give them an optimistic view of the future.
I like that. Let's see here. Let me grab. Hold on. DeRay says they are offering goods and resources and aid without the heavy thumb. He means China. He's saying that's how China is, responding. And I think that's how people see them. I think you have a good point there, DeRay. Sam says, thank you, Sam, for the $4.99 super chat. Appreciate it. Chickens eat bugs and give us tasty eggs. Save the bugs for the hens.
Great
He's
idea.
right.
Great idea.
He's right. Let's do that. I think Sam should be running things. I love it.
And the eggs will be cheaper too.
And the eggs will be cheaper because they'll be eating those cheap bugs. Yes, this is win-win. Sam has solved our problems. Thank you so much, Sam. I appreciate that. But I want to move to that piece that you just said, which is the youth. This is an optimism that I think we lack in particularly in America. We have a sad, broken, unhappy youth that sees no future, that thinks we're not going to get anything done, and is literally suicidal, like literally suicidal.
Yeah.
And I think this idea of motivating them to do something great, like what you're talking about, the Mars thing or the world infrastructure, whatever the case may be, is great. But you said something which I love, which I think is exciting. You said, we don't have to be pragmatic anymore. I think that motivates people.
In the last years of his life, LaRouche was constantly railing against pragmatism and pragmatic people. And I came to I was like, why does he keep repeat this over and over again? But I came to understand what he means, because, you have people who will come to a conclusion about what is possible on the basis of the capability that they see before them. And that is wrong.
Yeah.
Because the whole issue is that we have to create new leadership, new capability, new potential that never existed before. And if you want to do that, then you have to have faith in the 18 to 25-year-olds. And you have to go to them, and you have to educate them, and you have to work with them. That is hard, right, for us to do. I'm with you. I think the youth, they're going to be around. They're the ones who are looking to build things. If they're not optimistic, how the hell can we be? Yeah, right. Right? Realistically, they're supposed to feel like, I can take over the world. I can do everything. I can build whatever. If they're not thinking, how is some crotchety old man like me going to be? I'll forget it if you're waiting on me, right? You got to have, my generation's already like mad. We're sitting around still watching TV like the old people, right? We still do that, right? So the youth have got to be up there and be thinking about great things. I completely agree. Let me, if I could, guys, if you want to follow Daniel, please do so. Heading over to Twitter at Burke for Senate, BURKE 4 Senate. Follow him over there if you can. He's so good to come over. I appreciate it. If you like what you're hearing, please click that like button. It really does matter. Do it now if you like it. If you don't like it, I get it. I know why you're watching. But if you do like it, click the like button. Let people know, because I can get past all those algorithms that I have to get past all the time. Please do that. Daniel, before we wrap this up, is there anything else that we maybe missed or something we should be talking about?
Well, I got one more thing to say on the particular question that you had, which is namely that we need beauty.
Ooh, I like that.
Yes, I'm a firm believer in classical beauty, in classical music, in classical art of every type, and from different nations, different language cultures, but certainly from our own. And I think that this is going to be a big part of the future, because you look at the circumstance, the cynicism that we're talking about, the problems that people are dealing with, especially the youth, It has so much to do with the fact that they're being, not just that big tech is controlling what they see, that's a factor, it's a big factor, but also that the music and the, you know, the movies and the books that are being written nowadays, they're just horrible, and we need to bring back the most beautiful things that we know of in our culture. So that's what I want to share.
I love that. That's great. Guys, I want to say thank you all for watching. Daniel, thank you for giving me an hour of your time. I appreciate it. Guys, please follow him on Twitter if you would. He also has a link to the Institute on his Twitter account. So if you want to check out that Institute he was talking about, go to his Twitter. There's a link right there for that. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I will be back maybe tomorrow or the day after. One of these days I'll be back. I promise you. I will be back eventually. I will see you all